Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel, and I'm here for another throwback list video for you guys. Now for this video, I'll be going over some of the best metal albums of the year 1988. Now I do usually add rock to these list videos, but unfortunately there has not been many rock albums that have piqued my interest of the year 1988. But I'll tell you what, for metal, I think 1988 has been a very strong year for metal. Probably one of the best years for metal there is, especially given how many releases there have been. So with that being said, this list is in no particular order, and if your list is different than mine, that's totally fine with me. Just feel free to leave your list in the comments. So let's go ahead and begin, and I think we'll begin with the band Death, who are, of course, one of death metal's pioneers and an essential death metal band, of course. And so, of course, the album from Death that's on this list is their album Leprosy. Of course, rest in peace to Chuck, and some people say that this is one of Death's best albums. Now, would I agree with that? I'm not so sure. I might agree with that, I might not agree with that. It is a bit of a tough call. Death has no bad albums, so I mean, there's really no wrong answers when it comes to the Death discography. All their stuff is great. But with this album, it's raw, heavy, and there's a lot to like about it. And if you like your metal heavy, you'll probably like this. Of course, you've got really great songs on here like the title track Leprosy, Born Dead, and Left to Die. All really solid tracks. But yeah, Leprosy by Death, definitely a very strong album, and I think there's a lot of people that can agree that this is one of the best metal albums of the year 1988. Definitely a great album. So next we got some Overkill, and of course the album from Overkill that's on this list is Under the Influence. Some people say that this is one of Overkill's best albums, and understandably so. Overkill is just an excellent thrash metal band. I mean, 1988 has been really good for thrash especially, but yeah, this album, it really is great, and there's a lot to like about this album. Of course, I would say that the first half of this album is a little bit stronger than the second half of this album, but there's just really no going wrong with it. Of course, you got great songs like Shred and Never Say Never. I mean, the first few tracks on this album are very, very strong. So, Under the Influence by Overkill. If you like thrash metal and haven't heard this album yet, do yourself a favor and check it out. So, Under the Influence by Overkill. Definitely a great album and a classic. So next we got some Death Angel, and I think that they're one of the best thrash bands out there. So the album from Death Angel that's on this list is, of course, their album Frolic Through the Park. Of course, one of Death Angel's early albums, and I would say that this is one of their best. Now, there's some people that do prefer the modern era of Death Angel, which is fine, I think. I think that is respectable because the more recent stuff from Death Angel has been very solid, for sure. But, of course, you can't go wrong with their classic stuff. I mean, this album does have the opening track, Third Floor, which is maybe one of their best songs. I think Bored is also a really good song. I mean, this album has a lot of really strong tracks. So if you like thrash metal, once again, check out this album if you haven't already. So Frolic Through the Park by Death Angel. Definitely a great album. Okay, so next we got some Anthrax. Anthrax, in my opinion, is kind of an overhated band. I don't think that this band deserves all the criticism that they get, because I know some people say that they don't belong in the Big Four, that they should just be replaced by another band or whatever the case may be, but I personally like these guys. I mean, I can understand the complaints for them because I guess they are kind of silly, I guess that would be the best way to describe them. But I don't know, I think they are a very good band. So, of course, the album from Anthrax that came out in 1988 is their album State of Euphoria. And this, fun fact, was my first Anthrax album, the first one I ever heard, and the first Anthrax CD that I ever purchased. And, I mean, the album was obviously good enough for me to get into the band. Yeah, definitely a very good album. It's not my favorite Anthrax album, but I do like it though, of course. You got Be All End All, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, Who Cares Wins. I mean, this album definitely has a lot of strong material, so State of Euphoria by Anthrax, definitely a very good album. So next we got some Megadeth, one of the best thrash metal bands. I know there's a lot of people that say that Megadeth is their favorite thrash metal band, and of course the album from Megadeth that is on this list is So Far, So Good, So What. Some people say that the album is kind of underrated, and I can definitely understand why a lot of people might say that. Because when it does come to their 80s material, you could say that the album is kind of underrated, especially compared to, some of the other albums from Megadeth that came out in the 80s and around this time. Now, So Far, So Good, So What, it's not my favorite Megadeth album, but I do like it though. I do think it is a very good album. Of course, you got really great songs like Set the World Afire and In My Darkest Hour and Liar, all really solid tracks. I mean, In My Darkest Hour is maybe one of Megadeth's best tracks. I just really love everything about that song, so yeah. I mean, again, if you like thrash metal, definitely check out this album. Now, this album is not exactly as essential as some of Megadeth's other albums like Peace Sells But Who's Buying or Rust in Peace, for example. But this album is still worth checking out. So Far, So Good, So What by Megadeth. Very good album. So next we got a really great album by, of course, a very impactful metal band, not only in thrash, but just in metal in general, and that band is, of course, Metallica. Metallica, I think, is one of the best metal bands of all time. I don't care what anyone says about that. Yes, Metallica is very mainstream, but I think they're excellent. So, of course, the album from Metallica that's on this list is And Justice for All, and I think that this is one of their best albums. Probably my third favorite Metallica album, to be honest. There is just absolutely no going wrong with this album. Of course, the first album without Cliff Burton, may he rest in peace. Of course, the first album also with Jason Newsted, and you could barely hear the bass, or you can't really hear the bass at all on this album. And I know people kind of criticize the whole bass thing with this album or whatever, but even with that aside, I think the album is still very strong. You really can't go wrong with anything from this album, but of course you got great songs like Blackened, the title track, Eye of the Beholder, One, and The Frayed Hands of Sanity, all really solid tracks. So, And Justice for All by Metallica, definitely a very strong album, obviously a classic, and it's definitely worthy of being on the list. I mean, if you call yourself a metal fan or a metalhead and you're making a list of the best metal albums of 1988, I think this album ought to be on that list, given how impactful and just how great the album is overall. So, yeah, definitely a very great album for sure. Okay, so next we got some Queensryche. Queensryche, they're one of those bands that can be a little divisive, I guess. I know there's some people that really like them. There's some people that don't really like them at all. But I think Queensryche is a very solid band, even though they do have some pretty weak material, especially in the 2000s. But when it comes to the 80s and early 90s eras of Queensryche, I mean, those eras of the band were just excellent. But the album that's from Queensryche that's on this list is, of course, Operation Mindcrime, which to me is their best album. And it's my favorite Queensryche album. And it's, of course, their concept album. And there's just a lot to like about this album. I mean, if you're a Queensryche fan, this album ought to be in the top 3 best Queensryche albums for sure. Of course, you got really great songs on here like Revolution Calling, the title track, Speak, I Don't Believe in Love, and of course, Eyes of a Stranger, which is easily one of Queensryche's best songs, at least in my opinion, and it's maybe my favorite Queensryche song. But yeah, Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, definitely a very strong album, and it's definitely worth checking out. If you're into concept albums, you definitely need to listen to this. Seriously. So, definitely a great album. Okay, so next, we got some Fate's Warning, one of progressive metal's pioneers, of course, and the album from Fate's Warning that's on the list is their album No Exit. Obviously a classic, and this was my introduction to Fate's Warning, the first Fate's Warning album that I've heard. I almost said Queensryche again, but yeah, Fate's Warning, the first album of theirs that I've heard, and it's also the first Fate's Warning CD that I've purchased as well. Yeah, this album, it's excellent. It's easily one of their best, if not their best. This is a very energetic and heavy album too for the band, and of course you got really great songs like Anarchy Divine, Silent Cries, and In a Word. I mean, just excellent stuff. So yeah, No Exit by Fate's Warning, definitely a very great album and worth checking out for sure. Alright, so the last album that's on this list is from Iron Maiden. Obviously a really great band in metal, and I would say that they are an essential metal band. If you call yourself a metalhead and you're not a fan of Iron Maiden, I mean, what are you doing? You definitely need to check these guys out, and really look into their discography. So the album from Iron Maiden that's on this list is, of course, their concept album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which to me is one of Iron Maiden's best albums, if not their best, and it's maybe my favorite Iron Maiden album, just maybe. But yeah, what a strong album this is. It is one of Iron Maiden's proggiest albums. Now, Iron Maiden did go a little prog in the modern era of the band as well, like the 2010s decade of Maiden, which to me didn't really work as much as it did on this album. So yeah, I really do like the way they experimented on this album with the synth work and the progginess on this album. And this album probably does have some of their best tracks. I mean, you got really great songs like Can I Play With Madness, The Evil That Men Do, and the title track. The title track is just epic. It really is. I mean, I really like the guitar work in that song. The Clairvoyant is also great. But yeah, what a strong album this is. So, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden. Definitely a great album and a classic, of course, and worthy of being on the list. So there you have it. That is a list of some of the best metal albums of the year 1988. So let me know what you guys think of this list. So with that being said, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day and take care.